It's time to take your seat in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Here's your host, Mike Vaccaro.
Well, thank you, Chuck, and welcome everybody. Mike Vaccaro back here in the front row. I am your host. Behind the scenes, as always, is J.R. Quitman, our creator, producer, and director. Coming up today, this one's a good one. Bobby Valentine. You may know him as a manager for the Mets and the Rangers. Also played baseball, Major League Baseball, came up with the Dodgers. Spent a lot of time with Tommy Lasorda. He shares those stories and so many other stories. He's got a book out right now, Valentine's Way, and we touch on some of those stories here in this episode. So come along for the ride. This is a great one, folks. Bobby Valentine is our guest in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Well, Bobby, first of all, thanks so much for joining us here today, and a lot to get to with your life. As you said, we're going to touch on your book, Valentine's Way, My Adventurous Life and Times, and it certainly has been for you. And again, thanks so much for joining us here today. This is amazing.
A lot to talk about. There's no doubt about that, because there's no baseball. We have to fill the void, and the only way of filling that void is with the past.
That's right. We're going to talk about that. Let's start way past for you, and let's start growing up. Stamford, Connecticut, born in 1950. Tell us about what life was like for you early on, and where sports were in your life at that point.
Okay. Stamford, Connecticut, great town, great family, great community, all that lucky stuff that some of us get to have when we're growing up. I played at a baseball field where there was an old scoreboard, and on the top of it, it said Stamford, Connecticut, baseball capital of the world. I thought that was really cool, and I actually thought it was for a while growing up. It was paramount, baseball and football and track and basketball and ballroom dancing, all those athletic events kept me out of trouble, without a doubt. Got me, to understand competition, friendship, teamwork, all those things. And luckily I had great coaches, not only great teammates, but great coaches.
Well, you're talking about the sports, but let's go to ballroom dancing for a while, because I saw that in your bio and I wasn't sure if it was correct or not. But how did that materialize, and how did that help you, with your sports career?
Well, Little League, it was at the park every day, and then there's a little Pop Warner football, and then there were the activities that you get to run around, and I was pretty good at all that stuff. And my mom said, "Hey, you're not going to just be an athlete. You're not only going to play sports, you got to have some culture in your life." So she said I had two chances: sing or dance. And I couldn't sing, so I decided to dance. And so I, at 12 years old, I started taking these lessons in the old firehouse ballroom, where the gals were on one side and the guys on the other, and they show you a step, and then you'd find a partner and you'd try to do the box step or the cha-cha-cha or whatever the step of the day was. I happened to be pretty good at it. And by the time I was 13, the teacher said, "Hey, would you think about competition?" And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And before we knew it, we're at the Waldorf Astoria, the Edison Hotel. Finally, it took me, when I was about 4 years later, I wound up dancing at the Fontainebleau Hotel for an international dance championship, which I won. And also danced the Viennese Waltz at the opening of the New York Pavilion at the New York World's Fair back in '64. So it was really cool. And for whatever it's worth, if anyone's listening, it is an athletic event, and it checks all those boxes, even contact if you're going there. But, you have teamwork, you have rhythm, you have balance, you have precision where you need to do the step, or you're paying for a new pair of shoes for your dance partner.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. There's a lot of correlations there. As you said, very athletic to do that, and amazing that, again, that was part of your growing up with all the other sports that you were playing. As you said, baseball, football, track and field. You were a 3-time All-State football player as well. And was at one point, was football more your sport and what you were really excelling in at the time?
Well, more people got to see me for sure. We had thousands of people at football games, and we had 10s and 20s at baseball games. So it was more glamorous for sure. But that was all kind of happenstance for me. I was lucky where they closed the junior high school in my hometown. So instead of being a ninth grader in junior high school, I was a ninth grader in high school, because they put the ninth graders up in the high school and took the seventh and eighth graders and spread them around the city. And with that being said, I got to learn all the plays as a ninth grader. When the sophomore season started, which is at the beginning of the school year, I already knew all the plays. So I got to start opening day, and we had a state championship team. And I scored 4 touchdowns the first game, and I guess the rest is history. Yeah.
And with that, I mean, you were recruited as a dual sport athlete, right? Both football and baseball. You were recruited by a number of schools, big time schools as well.
Yeah, and remember, Mike, that was 1968, 67 when I was being recruited. There wasn't a lot of scholarship money for baseball in those days. Arizona State had a little, Michigan said they had a little, University of Arizona had a little. But, if I was going to get someone to pay the full $1,700 tuition fees that my family couldn't afford, I had to have a football scholarship, and that's what I got at the University of Southern California.
Yeah. So how does that work out? You go from Stamford, Connecticut to Southern California. That had to be a huge adjustment for you.
Oh, I reckon it was. Yeah. Yeah. And not only was it a huge adjustment, I went out as a junior and got recruited by John McKay for USC. And I was traveling around looking at, I think I went to about 30 different universities, 1-night stays, 2-night stays, trying to figure out what the heck was going on. I'm the first guy in my family to go to college, so there wasn't a lot of advice being given out on the Sunday dinners. But luckily, my high school coaches were spectacular, and they knew how to lead me in the right direction. And when I finally got to be there as a student, a year after I was there as a recruit, it was like a panic situation. I left minor league baseball. Yeah, well, let's get that straight so people put things in perspective.
Yeah,
because I think
1968, you were drafted by the Dodgers, 5th overall, correct? So you never really played, I guess, at USC. Is that correct?
exactly. In those days, if you were a pro in one sport, you were a pro in all sports. And the guy who changed that, just for those trivia guys out there, is Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge was playing professional baseball when he challenged the rule with the Supreme Court and said, I want to go back to BYU and finish my basketball seasons. And he did. And now you're only a pro in the sport that you're designated in. But at that time, you were shut down in all of them. So I did sign, interestingly enough, to, our draft, which was going to be the big occurrence, in my hometown, was the day after Bobby Kennedy was assassinated.
Wow.
So the real talk around town was, oh my gosh, another Kennedy. Oh, how do we live with this? Oh yeah, and by the way, Bobby got drafted, and I left a couple days later for Ogden, Utah, played that minor league season, and then got on a plane, flew to LAX, took the cab with my 2 suitcases from Los Angeles airport down to USC, paid the $9.20 cab ride or whatever it was. It was expensive. And then went to check into the dorm that I had on my application papers. And when I went to check in, they said, oh, you're a scholarship player? I said, well, I used to be a scholarship player, but now I'm a professional. And the gal behind the desk said, that's great. You're not in this dorm. It's only for scholarship athletes. You're at Tooten Hall. And Tooten Hall, with the 95-degree weather, was all the way across the other side of campus. Actually, it was off campus. It was a foreign exchange students dorm. And I carried my suitcases. I must look really cool. I think I had a leisure suit on that I sweat totally through in the 95-degree heat of LA, thought I was going to be cool, and I was anything but.
And you get there, and your roommate. Tell us about your roommate at USC, because it was a guy that eventually you guys would be teammates with down the road as well, right?
Well, yeah. Interestingly enough, Billy Buckner was my teammate in Ogden where we had Tommy Lasorda as our manager in rookie ball. And he flew up to Napa to drive down from Napa in California to USC. I didn't have a car yet. He had bought a car quickly with his with his bonus money, and we met up. We were in different dorms. They were both horrible dorms. So the second day we were on campus, we went to the baseball coach, Justin Dedeaux, actually the son of the baseball coach at the time. Rod Dedeaux was the coach, and said, "What do? We can't live in these places. I'm with a guy who doesn't speak English." And Billy said the same thing. And he said, "Well, why don't you just join a fraternity and live at the fraternity?" And we said, "Oh, cool. How do we do that?" And he said, "Well, they're rushing right now. Just go over to 28th Street where all the fraternities are and tell them you want to join." And that's what we did. Went to the first house on the block. A bunch of guys were standing outside after lunch looking at all the girls going by. And we went up and said, "Hey, we'd like to join." And that brought out a roar from the crowd. "Hey, these guys want to join. How about that, guys?" Because you had to be rushed and pinned and be a legacy a lot of times. So, they told us, "Hey, the house across the street just got thrown off of campus. They're renting some space. Why don't you go rent a room across the street?" So we wound up renting a room across the street, going through Hell Week with the Sigma Chi fraternity, and together, Billy Buckner and I were then roommates there. We later were roommates in AAA. We were later roommates in the major leagues, and we had foot races every single day, whether we had sneakers on, we were in bare feet at the beach, we had our dress shoes on or boots on. There was always a pole up in front, and it was ready. It was, "Okay, ready, boom," and then we'd race whatever that 30 yards. And he never did beat me, but he tried every single day, and he was a fast runner.
Yeah. Again, you came up and you were a pinch runner early on in your career. We'll get to that in a second. But, I want to mention, you mentioned John McKay, Rod Dedeaux, and then, you were going to play for those guys. You didn't because you went pro ball. And then Tommy Lasorda is your manager. I mean, that's three pretty good legendary coaches and managers there. What was it early on, your impression on Tommy Lasorda?
Well, he was just amazing from the first day I ever met him to the time I gave his eulogy. He was the most amazing person I ever met in my life. And not only because he was a great after dinner speaker, a great batting practice pitcher, a great team builder, or a great friend. It was because he understood life. He got it, and he lived it to the fullest, and kind of changed the paradigm. Luckily for us, we went to rookie ball, and my good friend Zach Manassian, who happened to be the clubhouse guy in 1968, who's still my friend today, 100 years later, whose sons are both executives with different major league teams, one with San Francisco and one with the LA Angels, and another one works in baseball with the Atlanta Braves, amazingly. But Zach Manassian, who is the clubhouse guy, said to me, like the first day, he says, "You're not going to believe this manager that you have," because he was there with them the prior 2 years. And I didn't believe it. He was amazing. And first thing he said, "Hey, I don't like you because you're Italian. I like you because I'm Italian." And then he said, "You are the first round choice." And I said, "Of course I am. I know that. What are my duties? Just tell me what you need me to do." And he said, "Well, the first thing you need to do, being you're the first round draft choice, is buy the manager a steak dinner." So on the way from the airport, we stopped at a steakhouse and I bought him a steak dinner.
That's great. Great story there. And you're only 18 at the time. Again, and on this team, you look at this, the Ogden Dodgers, you had Bill Buckner, you had Steve Garvey, you had Tommy Lasorda. I mean, could you see at that point that you guys were all going to eventually make it to the majors?
Well, obviously, we believed that we would. We didn't think the major leagues was that big a deal. We were great baseball players, and Tommy made us think that way. Matter of fact, Tommy had us write letters to the player who was playing the position at the major leagues, our position, and say, "Hey, get ready to move over. we're on our way. And that was also quite the thing. But remember, this was Tommy Lasorda as a young man. He was a scout and a manager for 2 months a year, rookie ball. This is his third year at rookie ball. He was trying to get out of that and move up the ladder. And as crazy as it is, he jumped from rookie ball to AAA, which isn't done very often with managers. And, he jumped over a lot of guys who were managing in A ball and AA and waiting in AAA. And my goodness, it was quite the experience.
Yeah, the Dodgers certainly saw something in him, to have that elevation. And you kind of moved along with them at times as well. In 1969, you went to AAA Spokane. Again, he was your manager there. And then at 19 years old, you get called up, a late season call up to the Dodgers. What was that like? Again, you're still very young in your career, and you're on the major league level at that point.
Yeah, Mike, I remember how crazy it was in those times. There was a thing called the Vietnam War going on, and there's also a thing in our country called the draft. And so when I signed my contract, there's a little clause that said that I would remain a full-time student in college, which would give me a draft deferment. So I had to get to school the first day of registration and sign my own check for the books and tuition, which made me a full-time student. So that the season ended and we rushed to school. The season in AAA ended, we rushed to schools. It ended on September 1st. Registration was September 3rd. I got a call on September 1st from Al Campana saying they extended the roster, and Billy Buckner and I were both going to be on the 40-man roster when the Dodgers were home. Come down to Dodger Stadium, which is right down the road from USC, and we'll have a uniform for you. So, yeah, so in the daytime, I was a student. In the evening, 9 different times, because there were 9 home games, I left USC and went down from my speech class to my batting practice at Dodger Stadium. It was pretty cool, but it was spinning really fast.
So if you don't go to USC, your life maybe unfolds a little bit differently. Is that what you think? Again, USC being there with the Dodgers obviously was a perfect fit.
Yeah, it all worked perfectly, and there was no planning of that by anyone. There was no coaxing to go to USC. As a matter of fact, I have a handwritten letter from Walter O'Malley, the owner of the Dodgers at the time, telling me that to go to the University of Penn and get your education before you become a pro. Don't be silly and sign a pro contract. And that was before I was drafted by the Dodgers. And his story changed afterwards, for sure.
Yeah, there you go. You wanted to go to Penn, go to Wharton School of Business here, I guess. But you went a different route, and it certainly worked out for you. And again, you get the call up, no at-bats, but you're a pinch runner. What was that experience like for you, that late season call up back in 1969?
Well, we were sitting on the bench. We took batting practice with the extra men. And we got to meet all the guys because we hadn't been in spring training. I got a call one night. Hey, get ready. You might pinch run. So I went and found my helmet and, did a few jumping jacks down in the in the runway. And sure enough, I'm in my first game against the New York Mets, who later became the '69 Miracle Mets, who in September, if they lost the game against the Dodgers, they probably wouldn't have made the playoffs and won the National League East. And I had a chance to steal home plate where the Danny Ozark, the third base coach, with, I believe, it was Jerry Kuzman pitching, and a big windup, a left-hander. He said, hey, you could steal home on this guy. So I was there, and I was timing him as he wound up, and I wasn't going to steal on that pitch. I was going to steal on the next pitch. There's a line drive to left field, and I had no chance to steal. So, and it was the third out of the inning. So anyway, kind of interesting the way all that worked out.
Yeah. We'll never know. I think you probably could have made it home there. So 1970, then you go back to AAA again with Lasorda, Pacific Coast League champs there, and you were the MVP. So obviously you took going back to AAA very well. What did you use that experience for? Because it worked out again with the MVP season for you.
Well, Mike, you have to understand, the first time I went up, I was 19 years old. I was supposed to go to A-ball. Instead, there was an injury. I went to AAA. I stunk it up for the first 2 months that I was there. I had more errors than the entire team put together playing shortstop. I was a center fielder in rookie ball. Tommy was going to convert me to a shortstop because Maury Wills was much older than Willie Davis, and there was a better chance of me getting to the big leagues quicker if I was a shortstop than a center fielder. And there were no trades in those days, and you're part of the organization until they decided you had to leave. So instead of planning my future in the minor leagues until Willie Davis left the Dodgers, he kind of planned it for me to be a shortstop. But I was thinking, and during that first year in '69, the pitchers decided they didn't want to pitch when I was playing shortstop. Tommy had a legendary clubhouse meeting where he told the guys to go and get my autograph because someday I'll be in the big leagues and they'll be at home watching me on TV. And the next year I came back with confidence, and as a 20-year-old, was the MVP of the league and was ready to get to the big leagues.
And you did. You made the roster in 1971 with the Dodgers in spring training. What was it like to finally know, okay, you were there, and you were there for a couple of years, and this is your spot. You earned this spot. What was that like for you?
Well, actually, it was brutal the first year because I pulled out the idiot card after I got to Arizona State, where I transferred from USC because I had been beamed with a pitch that pushed my cheekbone down 3.5 inches after being MVP the last game of the playoffs. And they had to fix it, and the Dodgers had to see if I could still play. So I went over, played in the instructional league. And in the instructional league, after the instructional league, I decided to play flag football for my fraternity football team. So my first year in the big leagues was a year with a Joe Namath type brace on my knee that was totally reconstructed. I couldn't play shortstop for about 3 months of that season, and my speed had diminished a little because I was running around with this heavy brace on my leg, and I kind of fell out of favor.
Yeah, nowadays I'm sure those contracts would not allow people to go play football with their fraternities, right?
I don't know if I was allowed to play that. I told him I stepped on a sprinkler head because I read in the Mickey Mantle autobiography that he stepped on a sprinkler head when he hurt his knee. So I tried that. They didn't fall for it. Yeah.
So how do you recap your time with the Dodgers? 71 to 72, you're eventually traded then in 1972. Do you think it's, in your mind, a little bit more unfulfilled?
Yeah, frustrating. Yeah, frustrating. It didn't work out. I thought I'd get to the big leagues with Tommy. Tommy was still in the minor leagues. The old regime was there. They wanted to keep the old regime kind of players. Billy Buck and I were just pinch hitting and spot starting, on day games after night games, or when there was a tough pitcher pitching and the starting player didn't want to play. So it was something less than what I always dreamed it to be.
And eventually, kind of with that, you get traded. You get traded to the California Angels. Among the people in that trade was Frank Robinson. As it's amazing just the different lives that you have been a part of and touched during your life and your career here. But was that a hard pill to swallow, getting traded for the first time like that?
Well, it was expected, and I was hoping that it would happen, and I was hoping it would be a New York team. Obviously, at the time, I was down playing winter ball with Tommy Lasorda, and we talked about it every day. What team would need me? What team would be cool? Because in those days, you really didn't know the other teams. You only got to read the sporting news once a week that came out on Saturday to figure out what all the other teams were. You knew about your team, but Tommy would read the sporting news and would know about every other team because he wanted to know about every player that was available and would be available in the future. So, he picked a few teams, and one teams he kept talking about was the Angels because they traded Jim Fregosi the year before for Nolan Ryan. And so Jim Fregosi was the shortstop, and Tommy kept saying, well, that's right down the road. And I know Harry Dalton, who became the new general manager, who came from Baltimore, and that's why he brought Frank down from the Dodgers in the same trade. So, that whole circle worked, and it was cool. It was exciting. I was stoked. I didn't have to move. I could stay in the same place I was living in. I knew where Anaheim Stadium was, and I could stick it up the butt of the Dodgers every day in the same newspaper in the same town. I really wanted to do that, Yeah.
But with that, though, you had a pretty bad injury, though, right? May 17th,
Yeah.
1973, some compound fractures going for a ball in the outfield.
Yeah, that was my idiot card again. I was the shortstop. I won the shortstop job. I was playing shortstop. I was leading the league in hitting, all that stuff. I was doing everything, including being the teacher's pet. The new manager was a guy named Bobby Winkles, who is the first manager ever to go from the collegiate ranks to the major league ranks. And he went from Arizona State up to the major leagues. He recruited me at Arizona State when I was in high school, so there was some familiarity. So I was his third place hitter, and I was the teacher's pet, and I did everything he wanted me to do. One of the things he wanted me to do on a certain day was play center field because the center fielder had a bad back, and I said I could do that with my eyes closed. And lo and behold, playing center field, Nolan Ryan breaks the losing streak when he's on the mound, throws his first no-hitter, and superstitious Bobby Winkle says, "Hey, let's keep this lineup going. We got a winning streak soon, but you'll be at shortstop tomorrow." And tomorrow never came because I tried to catch a home run and ran into a wall, broke my leg, and got carried off the field. And, the rest was basically, you're not ever going to be that player again. Let's think about other things, even though I thought I'd be the other player. But 3 or 4 years later, I realized I couldn't be.
Well, the effort certainly was there. They didn't have the result that you wanted. And let's go back to Nolan Ryan for a second. As you said, you're in the outfield for a no-hitter, his first no-hitter, right? What's that like as a player, being out there behind a pitcher who's having a great game, but a no-hitter? Are you worried? Are you what's it like out there for you?
Oh, as much as I remember, and of course things could be changed over the years, but I was standing there hoping the ball would be hit to me, because if it was hit to me, it was going to be an out. And, that's the only way I was looking at it. This is me coming over from center field, making an easy catch, of course. I made a little more difficult catch, I think. Maybe that's Ken Berry with, I think the last out, he was the center fielder. He moved over to right field for that game. That was his first day back with a back injury, and he was going to be in center field the next day. But, early on, I remember being at second base when I was playing shortstop. We were playing Detroit, and the great Al Kaline got to second base after walking and advancing on a wild pitch. And I went over and said, "Al, how's he throwing?" And speaking of Nolan, who was pitching that day, and he says, "Well, if they don't make one of those two pitches illegal, he's going to throw a no-hitter." And that's when I figured that his stuff was that much different than all the other stuff that I was hitting against, because, there are good pitchers. There's Burt Blyleven, and, there's Ferguson Jenkins. And, there are good pitchers pitching then, but there weren't pitchers who every day out had a chance of throwing a no-hitter. There was one of them, and his name was Nolan.
Yeah, he was pretty dominant. You were actually his manager for a couple of those as well. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But again, with the Angels, and then you were traded Padres, Mets as well. And with the Mets, tell me about the Midnight Massacre trade, because that goes down into history as a big one. Tom Seaver goes from the Mets to the Cincinnati Reds. And, Seaver, obviously, as everybody knows, a great career he had with the Mets. What was it like being part of that trade?
Yeah, so now we're at 1977. I'm with the Padres. I'm going to settle down. Buzzy Bavasi, who was with the Dodgers, is now general manager of the Padres. San Diego's a beautiful place. I buy a house. I'm going to, live there until my career ends. And on June 15th in the morning, I get a call saying, "Congratulations. I know you always wanted to play in New York. You now have your chance." And I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, we just made a trade, and the Mets want you to meet them tomorrow night." and which was really kind of one of those things where I said, "Oh, I'm going to the Yankees. That would be cool," because they were the team I rooted for when I was young. But that wasn't the case. I went to the Yankees. Now, remember, I mentioned the sporting news and not knowing about everything else. Well, I knew that the Mets won the championship in '69 and the division in '73, and I knew the Mets were a good team, but I had no idea at the time about the turmoil in New York, about the Dick Young ownership, Tom Seaver, Dave Kingman, and Kingman and Seaver both went to USC. Interestingly enough, and they both spoke their mind. Interestingly enough, I guess we all took the same course there, and they were just run out of town in a midnight massacre. And when I got there, I thought there'd be some excitement about a trade, but there was no excitement at all. The first day back at Shea Stadium, there were boos. There were many fans. First off. Thousands, not tens of thousands, and all of them were angry, and they were all booing, and they were all yelling at the people who were in the trade. And luckily, I wasn't in the Cincinnati trade. Often I got confused, and I would go, "I wasn't in the Cincinnati trade," and that kind of let me off the hook, even though it wasn't the Dave Kingman trade. And Dave was, as good a player as they had, other than Tom Seaver. So it was really kind of weird, really weird.
Yeah, Tom Seaver certainly loved there with the Mets. And so you're there for a little bit. 1979, you get released. You go back across the country to Seattle, right? And you made your debut as a catcher for the Mariners. How does that happen? You've been a shortstop, you've been a second baseman, an outfielder, and now you make a debut as a catcher?
Well, that was one of those things. Two catchers got hurt, and Darryl Johnson, the manager, came down and said, "Hey, you've caught before, haven't you?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." He says, "Well, you're the next guy up." And then the third catcher got hurt, and I got to go in the game. I had never put on the catcher's equipment before in my life. I warmed up a lot of pitchers because I felt that I could do anything I needed to do, but never put on the equipment and went in, caught 5 innings, and I guess I did a good enough job that I caught again before the year was over. But that was really weird.
So again, you were catching there, and finally you retire in at age of 29. I mean, obviously young to retire. What went into that?
Let's get it straight. I wasn't retired. They retired me. I waited. I waited for the phone to ring. The phone never rang, so then I retired. Yeah, I was hoping maybe one more year, but I wasn't a very good player. My leg was crooked. I was limping around the field. I could get a hit once in a while, but I wasn't really a useful player.
How was it catching with all those injuries? Again, with the legs that trying to catch that fly ball earlier in your career, you get the compound fractures. How was it catching? Did that hurt your career toward the end? Could you have had some more time if you didn't catch?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I probably could have had more time if I didn't take as many cortisone shots as I did. Cortisone was a new thing back there in the 70s, and but probably 75 through 79. If you say every 3 weeks they were sticking a needle like this big into your ankle to kind of ease the pain, because the leg healed, but it healed crooked, and so it put all the pressure on the ankle. And so the ankle bent less every day because of arthritis, and probably because of the cortisone that was in there. So, I don't know that catching really did anything to retard my growth.
So as you said, kind of forced retirement at age 29. You didn't want to retire. You thought you could still play. What were you doing between then? In 1985, you get on the Mets coaching staff. So what were you doing during that gap? And was coaching and managing, did you think that was going to be the next progression with your career?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Before I went to the Mariners in '77, when I was with the Mets, and I had another operation where the doctor thought he could fix my ankle. And then when it healed, I went down to winter ball where Tommy Lasorda was '76. Tommy Lasorda was managing again. And I said, "Hey, Tommy, you're the only one that I play great for, and you're the only one who knows how good I can be. Watch me play for a month and tell me what my skill level is." And after a month, he said, "Hey, by the way, your skill level is about that of a coach. Maybe you should start coaching." And after we, stopped crying and finished the beer and finished the pizza, we went back to the hotel. And I started thinking about coaching. In 81, I was a minor league coach with the Padres. In 82, I was a minor league coach with the Mets. In 83, I was a big league third base coach with the Mets under George Bamberger, if anybody remembers when he was the manager, and then Frank Howard, and then Davey Johnson. And by mid 1985, I had a few years of major league coaching under my belt, and my old teammate from the Mets, Tom Grieve, who's now the general manager of who at then was the general manager of the Texas Rangers, called, and the next thing you know, I was a Ranger.
Go back for a second. Again, Tommy Lasorda is such a great influence for you in your playing career. So you give him credit for realizing, okay, this is the next step in my career. It's not going to be playing forever. Obviously, nobody can, but coaching and managing, he kind of opened your eyes to that.
Well, yeah, he shocked me with reality. Like, stop fooling yourself. You don't have balance, and you don't have speed, and you're not going to be useful at a major league level. So, I stopped fooling myself from then on, and I tried to fool other people, and the fooling stopped at the end of the 79 season. Matter of fact, the Mets released me in 78, so I was finished. There was 2 days left in spring training. The heavens opened up, and somehow I got a spot in the Seattle Mariners. You probably have to read that chapter because it's pretty cool.
Yeah, again, chapters from your book, Valentine's Way. If you, certainly recommend the book, because we're just touching on some of these stories here. But let's start with the Rangers now. Again, you start with your managerial career. I just said started in 1985, a full year in 1986. You finished second for the AL Manager of the Year. What was it like? What attracted you to that, and why did you seem to do such a great job, obviously, as a manager, starting off your career with the Rangers?
Well, it was familiarity with the guy who was hiring me. Tom Grieve and I sat the bench, as I mentioned, with the New York Mets. And, we spent a lot of time together. We went out to dinner together. I knew him. He knew me. He respected me as a person and me as a baseball guy. And now he had an opportunity to hire his first manager. And he wanted it to be me. And I could think of nothing other I'd rather do. The situation was less than the best situation. The ballpark was a kind of converted Double-A field. There was no fandom. The Texas fans thought the Rangers rode horses and wore white hats with a badge, and we had to convince them that the Rangers were the other sport in town, other than football, of course. And it was a tough go of it, but there was a guy like Bobby Bragan who was there, who's a mentor and an elderly statesman, ex-manager, ex-Dodger, who helped me along. A great guy named Mike Stone, who was the president of the team, and of course Tom Grieve. So we were going to just do everything we had to do, make it into a major league franchise, and we succeeded.
Yeah, you certainly did. And during that time, your owner ran into some financial trouble, and here comes an ownership group led by George W. Bush, and he becomes the lead owner of that team. What was it like working for him and reading some of the book? I know you mentioned that he's just a big baseball guy, and he just loved being around baseball.
He loved being around baseball, and he was a good person. He cared about everyone individually, and he never wanted to interfere. He always had his workout at the stadium because I had the best shower that there was. His offices were up the street a little ways, and he'd run around the track to get his jogging in, and he'd take the shower in my office, and he'd always be there when I got there, and I got there, a little afternoon. And as soon as the first player showed up, he would leave, because he never wanted to interfere, and he never wanted to, be divisive in any way, but he wanted to learn. And he did. He learned about hitting and pitching and team building and organizations. And I think he would have been a great commissioner of baseball if he stayed with baseball. Maybe he still could be here in his latter years, because his knowledge and his passion were a great combination.
So you guys had a great relationship, great working relationship during that time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was V. He was George or W. And, we did the lunches, we did the talks, we did everything, and we also did the firing. When it came time for me to leave, I knew it was time for me to leave. I kind of, I was at the point where I wanted to do one thing and the organization wanted to do another. And when you get there, you just have to part ways.
Yeah, 1992, halfway through the season. Is it harder though doing it during the season like that? Was it harder on you, harder on the team? What was that like?
Well, I had never been fired before, so I don't know if it was harder or softer, but it was hard at the time. I had a commitment. I had a home. I knew everyone in town. I knew everyone in the organization, and I thought we had a chance of taking the next step. But for a year and a half or so, we were stutter stepping, and a change seemed to be needed.
Yeah, so again, that's 1992. Eventually, you go to the Norfolk Tides, the Mets organization, AAA affiliate. What led to that hiring, taking over at a place I'm sure you haven't spent time in before then, and now you're the manager of the Norfolk Tides?
Yeah, the year in between the Rangers and the Tides, I worked for Jim Bowden in Cincinnati. First, I was going to be his advanced scout, and what I was going to do is develop my restaurant business, because at the time I had 5 restaurants and I thought I could have 100, and I was in negotiations with the Marriott hotel chain to put my restaurants in their lobby. So, being an advanced scout was perfect. I had all the days free. All I had to do was go to a game and watch a game and report on it. My God, 3 hours a day for work and a report. I could do this. And about 6 weeks or not even into the season, Tony Perez, who was the manager, might have been 3 weeks in the season, gets fired. Jim Bowden hires Davey Johnson to be the manager, and Davey calls me and says, "Hey, I need you as the third base coach." So from having the freedom to do what I wanted to do, I packed up and went to Cincinnati and became a third base coach and learned a new organization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't want to go backward and be a third base coach. I wanted to manage, and I put the word out that, I wanted to manage. The Mets heard about it, gave me a call and said, "Well, we have the AAA job offer opening. Are you interested?" I went down and met their owner, Ken Young, and their general manager, Dave Rosenfeld, who are terrific people. And I said, now this could be a nice working relationship, and took on the job as the Tides.
Yeah, it certainly worked out. You had a second stint after you went to Japan, but that second stint with the Tides eventually led you to the Mets, right? So for you, and I'm sure a lot of people recognize you from your time as a manager for the Mets. Is that where you think people connect you the most with your time as the manager for the Mets?
Yeah, depending on what side of the Pacific Ocean you're on. In Japan they know me as the Met of the Marines, and here I think, the TV commentating thing got a lot of notoriety because I was out there. The mustache, of course, got a lot of notoriety because it's circulated over the decades. But for the most part, the Met manager, that's a tag. Yeah.
Well, we got to talk about the mustache. You brought it up. June 9th, 1999 versus Toronto. So you have Mike Piazza at the time. You get him in a trade. That was obviously a huge trade for you, for the organization as well. Godson of Tommy Lasorda. And he gets, was it a call that you didn't agree with, and you get ejected because of that, and you kind of snuck your way back in. Tell us about this story.
Yeah, it was a real weird play. It was a pitch out and a catcher's balk and a catcher's interference on the same play. It was really kind of weird. Pat Mahomes, by the way, on the mound. That's
Wow.
right, Patrick's father, Pat Mahomes. So I called the pitch out with the runner going, which was the right call. But Mike stepped out of the box too soon. And you see the umpire there pointing to first base, meaning not only is he going to call catcher's balk and make the runner go to second, but he also called catcher's interference because the batter threw his bat at the ball and hit Mike's glove, and so the batter was going to get first base. I had never seen anything like that, and right there I'm saying, right before that I said, can I get thrown out for what I'm thinking? And he said no, and then I told him what I was thinking, and well, Yeah. I was in the clubhouse before you know it. Yeah.
But you weren't in there long. You came back out. What went into your disguise and coming back out there? Obviously, talking to you here, you're a playful guy. You're a fun guy, and was that kind of going through your mind coming back out there just to have some fun with this?
You know what's amazing is I just saw the replay, and I've been telling that story as Graybeck throwing the bat. He never threw the bat, and I don't know why he gave the batter first base. It should have been catches balk, and the runner goes to second. But why did he give the batter first base? That was weird. Anyway, 3 days before this, three of my coaches were fired. So the coaches who were in the dugout were not with me during spring training, weren't with me during that season. They really didn't know the team. And Oral Hershiser, who's standing there, who's supposed to be blocking the view of everyone, up on the top step, and no one will see you, Skip, just stay here and you can manage. And Robin Ventura, who I had pinch run for, was up in the clubhouse. They convinced me to go back down, wear a little disguise, and no one would ever know. And instead, I went back down, wore a little disguise, and everyone knew. Yeah.
How was that received by the players?
Oh, they loved it. It was a bad time for the players. As I said, we had a 7-game losing streak. We dropped out of first place. Catcher's balk, coaches fired, manager thrown out of the game. It was like one of those, oh, damn, what's going on here? So I think they needed a little levity. And I went down and saw frowns turn upside down into smiles, and we won the game. And, we went on to live happily ever after.
Yeah, sometimes as a manager, you've got to know how to push those buttons. You certainly were pushing the right buttons there, and certainly did in 2000. 2000 year high mark in your Mets time, leading them to the NL Championship, leading them to the World Series. Unfortunately, it didn't go your way against the Yankees. But what was that season like for you to have that in New York, not with the Yankees, a team that you grew up rooting for, but to do that in New York, close to home for you?
Oh, it was spectacular. I mean, the 97 was good. 98 was better. 99, we made the playoffs, went to game 6 of the playoffs, and now it's 2000. So the bar kept being raised, and with it came the excitement, the enthusiasm of the fandom, and it was really cool. I mean, people were becoming Met fans. People were going back to being Met fans. It was all happening in a wonderful way. My only problem was I was playing in the last year of my contract, and I had the edict from the owner that the only way to get another contract is if we made the playoffs. So there was a little something going on there personally, but it all worked out for the better, and we made the playoffs. We dethroned the Atlanta Braves, who people have to remember. When I mentioned 70, 96, 97, 98, 99, the Braves were winning every one of those years, and they were spectacular. And we weren't that kind of organization yet. We were trying to be, but it was a tough row to hoe, that's for sure.
So you take a team to the World Series. Unfortunately, it doesn't go your way, but do you look back at that run fondly, or do you look back and think more of the losses than of the wins that got you to that point?
When I look back at that team, those guys, the happening, it was very fun. When I hear some of the ways other people have looked at it, oh, well, you didn't win the whole thing. It kind of bothers me a little because they don't understand what it's like to be the second best team, or even to get to that World Series and to play a team, played the Yankees. They had won 14 straight World Series games. We're playing the Yankees in New York, where the mayor of our city is wearing a Yankee jacket. Where no one wanted us to beat the Yankees other than the Met fans, and that's Fred Wilpon there. A little discouraged because Armando's on the mound and he's a great pitcher, and he saved like 42 games straight during that year, and yet he became something other than a great pitcher because Paul O'Neill had a spectacular 9-pitch at bat, and I guess Jose Vizcaíno or maybe Ozzie Guillen, or I forget who it was that actually hit a little ground ball between first and second to drive in a run. So, it was all kind of regretful that guys like that, Armando Benitez, Todd Pratt, Johnny Franco, guys who are true blue Met guys, Benny Agbayani, that these guys couldn't get that ultimate goal. But they got a National League championship ring, and I hope they treasure it.
Yeah, certainly a great accomplishment there in itself, as you said. Eventually, your time there ends, and eventually you go back to Japan, and a better second time in Japan than the first time. Why go back there? Why back to Japan? And again, obviously, it worked out well for you, winning a championship.
Well, I committed to going there the first time, and I left kind of haphazardly, thinking I was going to be the manager of the Mets, which was kind of weird to do that. But to have that opportunity to manage the Mets, I decided to leave. It didn't happen immediately. It happened a year later. But coincidentally, and I don't believe in coincidences, I was eating lunch at the hotel, Four Seasons Hotel in New York City, with a wealthy friend of mine who was buying lunch. And at the end of lunch, a guy came over and tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around. It happened to be the owner of the Japanese team that I left 10 years prior. And he said, I read the paper. Sorry, you got fired, but would you come back and work for me again? And we shook hands at that time, and I got on a plane and became his manager for 6 years and had a glorious time across the Pacific.
Yeah, 2005 again, won that Japan series. And then it was in TV, as you said, with ESPN. You were on the Sunday Night Baseball there for a while, a short stint with the Red Sox. And then you decide to kind of leave baseball behind and you become the athletic director at Sacred Heart. What went into that decision, leaving behind a sport that you had been and been with you for so long, so many years, and try something different?
Well, it was just that, I was getting older, and I've done a lot of things in baseball. I went from the bottom to the top, and I knew it kind of inside out. And, the president of the university called and said, hey, would you give this a shot? And I said, I don't know if I could spell AD, never mind run a department. And he says, well, why don't you try it? And 8 years later, and 1,000 athletes and 100 coaches who all grew with me for 8 years and are better today than they were then, gave me a great experience. And now I'm a free agent again. I'm still working at Sacred Heart University, but I'm going to work with a major league team more than likely, not on the field, because, again, those nighttime jobs aren't part of my curriculum these days. But I'm going to probably be in a senior advisor role, being I'm a senior and I like to give advice. And, I'll do all the other things that I'm doing, trying to wind down things that I've done over the years, from the restaurant, my academy, and my film company, and the things that I spend time with. Maybe I'll pass the baton and see if I enjoy this retirement thing.
Yeah, I don't know if retirement's ever going to be a word that you use on a regular basis. One other thing I want to touch on here: you ran for mayor from your hometown, Stamford, Connecticut. Unfortunately, you didn't win. But what led to that, and what was that experience like? And could we see you, look at the political realm in the future? Again, you worked for George W. Bush. You have a great sounding board, maybe for someone to talk to when it comes to politics.
Well, I've been asked about other runs, but I did 7 months here in my hometown. It was a learning experience. We lost by hundreds of votes. In a very democratic town. I ran unaffiliated, and I just didn't like the environment. I wanted to get people to switch their thinking from the other side is something you hate. to the other side is something you work with. I didn't think that a city of Stamford, Connecticut, 135,000 people needed to be involved with the national politics and that city governance could be done differently. A lot of people got wind of the situation and kind of jumped on the bandwagon, but I needed 15,000 and I got 14,000 something. And that's more votes than any other non-Democrat ever got in our town. So it was a good run.
Yeah, and before that, you were Assistant of the Year in Stamford. You were the Director of Public Safety, so you had some experience with the city there as well. As you started here, we talked about the lockouts going on right now. What's your thoughts of the state of the game? Once the lockout is over, hopefully it ends soon, and we get back to baseball. And you said you want to get back involved as well as an advisor. Your thoughts on the state of the game and where this game needs to go to continue to improve, continue to obviously get the fans and the fan support for baseball?
Well, it's a labor dispute. It will be solved, and we will have baseball, in my opinion. What I'm hoping comes out of this is not only a new CBA, but I'm hoping some new leadership can come out of this. I hope that there could be maybe even a bond between those two sides of ownership and players, so that the agents who often become such a distraction and so much friction between the two sides are put in the background, and that some leadership from that player side and leadership from the owner side can move our game forward in a positive way. And I think we need positive movement. I think we have to stop, shooting ourselves in the foot. We have to stop, telling everybody about how terrible our game is and start telling people how wonderful it is and exhibiting it for the fans during their 3-hour stretch when they're watching our great game play.
Yeah, it is a great game. It's done well for you, obviously, in your career. Valentine's Way, My Adventurous Life and Times, a book that's out now. Certainly can get that on Amazon, other places as well. How else can people follow you if they want to follow you? Are you on social media? Do you do that?
Oh, I'm all over social, but I'm not there as regularly as I'd like to be. Again, I do all this other stuff, but at Bobby Valentine is out there, and I could be reached just by going over to my restaurant or going over to, this is my sports academy, going into my sports academy. I'm around often. There's no doubt about that. And my email is the same as it was in 93, and my phone's the same as it was in 96. So I'm easy to reach.
Well, this has been very enjoyable. Great stories. Again, we just touched on some of the stories here. If you want to hear more about them, Valentine's Way, in bookstores now, online as well. My Adventurous Life and Times, and certainly it has from ballroom dancing all the way now to a run for the mayor and everything else that you're doing. Bobby Valentine, I can't thank you enough for sharing some of those tales and those stories with us here today.
Well, great job asking the questions. I appreciate you giving me the time. Continued success. Take care, bro.
All right, thank you, Bobby. Well, again, my thanks to Bobby Valentine spending some time with us and sharing such great stories. Who knew ballroom dancing was a sport and such a big part of Bobby's life growing up? Our thanks to The Athletic and MLB Vault, some of the highlights that you saw there. If you enjoyed this one, enjoyed previous episodes, be sure to subscribe, like these as well. We'll have more great guests coming up. But again, great sitting down and chatting with Bobby Valentine here today. We'll see you next time, another edition of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.